So you're ready to begin the process of planning transition with your IEP team. Where do you begin? Well, the place to begin is with assessments. You have to assess what the area of need is to determine where you're going. Yeah. And one of the very first things that many IEP teams get involved in is what's called a person-centered planning. And oftentimes in districts, they will have somebody from their district who knows how to do that and is expert at that. Or it might be that they have to get somebody from outside of the district to come in as a consult model to run a person-centered planning. But it's a really good place to begin because it gives an overview of need. What are your dreams for the student? What are your nightmares for the student? And getting everything down as sort of that starting place of what do we need. It's that assessment of what further assessments we need, if that makes any sense.
It does. And really what you're hoping to accomplish as a team is that you're going to be developing transition services. And as the first step, as Julie said, you're going to want to do assessments. And they can look like any number of things, vocational assessments, interest inventories to find out what the students' interests are. But basically what the IDA wants IEP teams to be looking at are 4 key things as part of post-secondary goals, okay? Training, education, employment, and where appropriate, daily living skills, okay? And so those are really the areas that we're supposed to be assessing as part of this process.
And I think it's also important to know that assessments don't have to be something that you write down on a piece of paper. They come in many forms. It could be that it's an evaluation that a specialist does in a specific area of a domain. It could be that it's somebody observing your child, your student in the setting that you would like to see them in. So for example, if one of the goals is that they don't know how to do grocery shopping independently, you might bring them to the grocery store and assess how they do at that so that you can figure out, well, what are the skills that they need that they don't have right now? So it doesn't always have to be a test. It can be an observation. Right. It can be many things, but it's anything you do, any tool you use to gather that information.
Yeah, and basically what you're trying to do in all cases surrounding special education is looking at the unique needs of the child. And one of the things that I've found in my practice, Julie, is people often misunderstand transition services and they assume that transition services should only be provided to those students with significant developmental disabilities, when in fact the law says that transition services are supposed to be in place for all students who have special education needs, for all students who have IEPs. So as an example, if a student has a specific learning disability, Julie, doesn't mean we don't provide transition services. You still have to provide some transition services. They may look different, and therefore the assessment may look different. And in fact, the 2004 IDEA very clearly said that post-secondary education is something school districts are required to be providing services for students who have special education needs. So really, we're trying to get kids ready for college. So as part of the transition plan for the uniqueness of a child who is college-bound, you may be looking at very different kinds of assessments as part of that process. So it's based on the unique needs of the child, and you want to start by gathering information that assists the team in developing services and goals.
And on a practical point, talking about the child who is college-bound, you might be doing assessments that have to deal with executive functioning, planning and organizing, and that might be the weakness for that student. So those types of IEP goals are in the plan. That doesn't necessarily mean that that student will not graduate and go on to college the very next year after 12th grade. They may get all of those IEP goals met prior to going to college. There may be a student where they need an extra year and do several things, including continuing to work on those executive functioning skills. Right. So the assessment for a student who may not want to go on to college may look very different. You might be looking at assessments that are going to capture what that child wants to do as far as working.
Right. And if there is no flat rule for any one type of disability or one type of student, the bottom line is if your child has an IEP, an individualized education program, transition assessment needs to be the first step in developing those appropriate transition services for the unique needs of your child.